Hello again and welcome. This is the introduction information to the Complete Guide to Reading Rhythms Volume 1. After this video, you will be ready to begin Section 1. So, let's get started. Written music organizes sound and silence into time. To write music, much like with language, we use symbols to share these ideas. The symbols to express sounds and silence, along with the rules for writing them, were developed over a few hundred years. These rules have been solidified in the last 100 years or so, though new wrinkles appear from time to time. These rules for notation ensure the greatest number of people will be able to understand and use written music. To write music, there are a few things that we need to be able to express. First, we need to be able to represent sounds that are high, low, and in between. For that, we use a staff, usually made up of 5 horizontal lines and the resulting 4 spaces in between. That looks like this. The higher the sound, the higher the symbol is on the staff. The lower the sound, the lower the symbol is on the staff. Pretty simple so far, right? Next, there's often a need to group high notes or group low notes. For that, we use something called a clef. The clef is the symbol at the front of the staff. If our music is in higher sounds like trumpets, flutes, and female voices, we use a treble clef. For sounds that are lower like tubas, male voices, and bass guitar, we use a bass clef. For our purpose and the purpose of most drum music, we will use a rhythm clef, as we are not dealing with specific high or low sounds. The next symbol on any staff is the most misunderstood symbol in music. It's called the time signature. Time signature are the 2 numbers that look kind of like a fraction after the clef. When I ask a lot of more seasoned musicians who may or may not have had formal training what the time signature does, I get a lot of answers. Here's a few. It tells how fast the music is. No. It tells how long the music is. No. It tells how to, I don't know, which is the most honest answer. Or it tells the tempo. Now that one is the most correct, but time signature is not tempo, though they are closely related. And they don't really make a whole lot of sense one without the other. Have you ever heard a song and started tapping your foot or clapping your hands? Of course you have. As you were moving to the music, did you notice a repeating feeling in the music? Yes. Okay, so let's put that to use here. Think of the song Hey Jude by the Beatles. Now, as you think of that song, you might even begin tapping your foot or nodding your head right now. As you're thinking of that song and you're tapping your foot and nodding your head, you are expressing tempo and the time signature right now without even knowing it. This is stuff you already know deep down. Isn't that cool? We're just looking for how we write it on paper so people can understand it. Let's dig in a little more. The rate of speed of the individual pulses in that repeating cycle is called tempo. Words like largo, allegro, and presto are used to describe tempo in most classical music. Tempo now is most commonly referred to as BPM or beats per minute, which means how many pulses happen in 60 seconds. You with me? Okay, back to our song, Hey Jude. Lock into that steady pulse again, right? Now, as that steady pulse happens, do you feel a repeating cycle or a repeating heaviness? Can you count that repeating cycle in 3 or 4 beats? This song happens in 4 pulses or beats. So, for Hey Jude, the top number in the time signature is 4. I'll repeat myself. The top number tells us how many pulses or beats the music will be in. We just figured out that the top number or how many number for the time signature for the song Hey Jude is 4. The beats in that song are in groups of 4. Got it? Every song has a time signature, so I encourage you to start figuring out that top number or how many beats in a measure for whatever music you're listening to. Once you've figured out the number, check your work and count the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now about that bottom number. The bottom number, simply put, tells us what kind. It corresponds to a type of rhythmic value. For our purpose and for the entirety of Volume 1, we will only be concerned with the what kind number of 4. 4 corresponds to the quarter note, so that means the rhythms will all be played, or from the composer's point of view, felt in relation to that value. The most common what kind numbers are 4 and 8, but for now, like I said, let's keep it simple and just work with 4. Once you have practiced through this book with me, you will be solid in your understanding of what we call the quarter note pulse, or that bottom note of 4, and you'll be ready to tackle other what kind numbers. To recap, the time signature tells us how many we are counting and what we are counting. Top number, how many? Bottom number, what kind? Look at the first line of section 1 of your book. You'll notice a 4 over 4 as our time signature, or what we call 4/4 time. 4 on top is the how many number, so we'll count to 4. It's really that simple. The bottom number, or what kind, in our book is 4, so the quarter note gets 1 beat. For this book, we are only going to be concerned with music that uses the quarter note and is the what kind value. Right? Okay, so you're with me. Great. Now, the next symbol we need to know is the bar line. The bar line is the vertical line that crosses the staff, and it's really just a reminder of the time signature, like, hey buddy, start counting at 1 again. After every bar line, whether you see a note or rest, the count is always 1. So, as we look at the first line of section 1, you'll see 4 quarter notes, then a bar line, 4 quarter rests, then a bar line, and so on. You can't have 5 quarter notes, nor should you have only 3 unless thou proceedeth unto 4. Simply put, bar lines are visual guides to the repeating pulse that we talked about a moment ago. The space between each bar line forms a segment that we call a measure. That means that the time signature tells us how big each measure will be. Most of this book will have 4 measures on each staff. So, now we understand these music basics: staff, clef, tempo, time signature, bar line, and measure. Now, for the fun stuff. What do we do with those beats that we have arranged so nicely with time signature and bar lines? Now we can start talking about that sound and silence. Sound we call notes, and silence we call rest. Remember that 4 on the bottom? That was related to the quarter note. For this first section, each beat of the metronome we will either play when we see a quarter note, or we will wait 1 beat when we see the quarter rest. The symbol for making sound is the quarter note. The symbol for silence or waiting is the quarter rest. We will always count the beats out loud and tap our foot while we play. If you are not a drummer, clap as you count and tap your foot, or better still, play your instrument on a note, scale, or chord progression you choose. However, if you play a wind instrument, I highly recommend not playing, but counting and clapping. Or why not grab a pair of sticks and play along with me? All right, those are our basics for us to be able to get started reading the rhythms in this book. It really is that simple. So, are you ready to play the cat sat on the mat? Okay, one last thing. Before we put it into practice, let's talk about the all-important metronome I mentioned just a moment ago. The metronome, sometimes called a click, a met, or a splink, is a tool that makes perfectly even, unwavering, and oftentimes shamefully reliable tempo. Each click of the metronome will be 1 beat of music. We will use the metronome when working on the examples in this book to help us develop our own perfectly even, steady time when we were actually making music. The click is meant to be a guide to help you hone your personal pulse, your inner clock, as many musicians call it. The performance of music often does move or breathe faster and slower in pulse, but great performers are aware of this and use it to affect the music and not out of a lack of skill. Some music should never speed up or rush. Some music speeds up to build excitement, like Freebird or the Headhunters recording of Chameleon. It is skill and artistry when musicians do those things intentionally and for the effect. Using a metronome as our guide will help us really develop the awareness of those things. As we begin, notice the metronome will be set to match our time signature of 4/4, and I will have set a timer for 5 minutes as promised. As promised, we will work through the book one section at a time, starting slow, 40 beats per minute, and gradually building to a brisk tempo that is usable. So, are you ready? Me too. Let's get started. I'll see you in the next video, the first practice video of the Complete Guide to Reading Rhythms practice course.